is the award-winning historian and professor of history and American studies at Yale University, Dr. Joanne Freeman. Dr. Freeman, good to see you in real life again. It's nice for you to be here. I was alarmed on Monday when so much of this talk went from Donald Trump talking about witch hunt. It moves very quickly into fighting back and even the terminology civil war. And it's not rare. We've had people talking about civil war for the last 5 years. And then we see it move into action. And that's very alarming. There's no point at which Donald Trump or his circle have come out and disowned what happened in Cincinnati. But this person's actions, he tied directly to what happened in Mar-a-Lago and the fact that the FBI was on a witch hunt.
Right. Well, and I have a number of problems with branding whatever's going on right now a civil war. In part, as you're suggesting, it's an escalating phrase, right? So whatever's going on, it suggests something formal. It suggests something structured and organized. And right now, none of that is true, thankfully. But the other reason why I have a problem with that, calling anything that, is because oddly enough, I'm going to say it's comforting, which is going to sound counterintuitive. But in American history, when you say civil war, you think about a specific event. And
out of which much good came.
Exactly.
Identified as a positive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you say that, we're going to go into civil war, it links immediately back to the Civil War, right. Both sides, something that was framed, and, it takes away what I think is the real ugliness and violence beneath the surface of what's going on right now, right? This is largely extremist violence that we're seeing right now. This isn't a civil war. Now, we could argue about what gets up to the sort of measurement of civil war, but I think that hides things. I think it's a kind of history mask for what's really going on, which is not structured.
Which is, okay, so let's take that. What's happening is not structured. It is extremist. It's a lot of things, but one of the things that Ben Collins and I were talking about a couple of nights ago is that it's not coming from the deepest, darkest, grossest corners of the internet. This is actually fairly mainstream. This guy was an attendee at January 6th. He's a big believer in Donald Trump, and he took Donald Trump's words that this is a witch hunt and this is really bad and we're not going to take it anymore and we're going to fight back, which is language that you find very commonly across media these days.
Right. And that's an important thing because what it shows, and it's, again, something that might seem counterintuitive, is the importance of words. That words and rhetoric really matter, particularly if they're coming from someone high up. Not only do they frame things, but they're a way of sort of setting things in motion. I think that rhetoric is threatening, and we see this all the time, right? We've seen this during the January 6 hearings, that a threat comes out, and then there's a lot of threats that follow it, and there may not be specific violence that comes of it, but now anyone who's been threatened is going to be aware that there might be violence. And that's the power of these violent words, these threats, this rhetoric. Nothing has to happen necessarily, although in this case it did, even worse. But just the idea that there are these threats has an impact, and in some cases silences people. They self-censor because they don't want to get themselves in the middle of that kind of a mix-up.
We've got now politicians who are calling to defund the FBI, which is ironic because they didn't like to defund the police language. Marjorie Taylor Greene is selling equipment, gear, caps and things like that. But Paul Gosar, the Arizona representative, tweeted, "I will support a complete dismantling and elimination of the Democrat brown shirts known as the FBI. This is too much for our republic to withstand." And then he adds a whole bunch of people who are either conspiracy theorists or election deniers, or Carrie Lake, who's going to be the Republican candidate for governor in Arizona. The question here is the degree to which this now overlaps with reality. These are people who are elected officials or soon to be elected officials or have very, very big voices in what has become mainstream conservative media.
No, absolutely. And first of all, brown shirts does the same thing that Civil War does, which is it's like, oh, no, Nazis, right? This is something foreign. It's not American. We can sort of frame it in somebody else's conflict. We own this, number one. You're right. Number two, it's coming from people on high. It's going to have an important impact. So for sure, the higher up it goes, the more public it is, the more of an impact it's going to have and the more dangerous it is.
But are we post debate on this? I mean, how do you fix this when officials who like Donald Trump and don't like Democrats move to this direction and start this conversation, then people take action? It's like that guy who shot up the pizza parlor in Washington. He didn't kill anyone, but he really thought he was rescuing babies from, the basement of a place that didn't have a basement. What is the methodology for solving this?
That's a big question, Ali. I will say there is one thing that kind of comment about FBI brown shirts sort of elides, and it's happening a lot among some people on the right, and that is forgetting about the rule of law. The fact that there are laws that can be violated, the fact that violating them has an impact. You can brown shirt people all you like, but the fact of the matter is, if they're abiding by the law, if they're held to the law, that is a system not only of aggression, but a system of restraint. And right now there's a lot going on among some on the right that is kind of assuming that some people are above the rule of law. And that's not only incorrect, obviously that's dangerous.
Do you see, this was a fairly benign matter in that it was not a raid of Mar-a-Lago. It was an effort over months and months and months to get information, and then it seemed to be quite a polite search of the whole place. Everything seems to trigger this kind of overheated reaction. And again, we can discount the fact that some of it comes from politicians, but are you worried about the degree to which people hear this stuff and decide to act on their own?
Well, yes, and particularly, in an ideal world, you might say there wouldn't be social media, and then we wouldn't know within a nanosecond, like, oh, this happened, what does it mean? Because we don't know a lot of the details. They're sort of coming out, spilling out, leaking out, being revealed. Ideally, we wouldn't have people flying off because we wouldn't be as immersed or seemingly immersed in it as we are. So, yeah, it's totally true. And again, social media heats this sort of thing up, obviously, that someone makes a charge. And nowadays, what is reality when people are messing with video and doing all kinds of things? It's very easy to see how a false charge, how a lie, how manipulated video of some kind can send people off in a direction. And, your question is a big one. Then what do you do? And I think reminding people about the rule of law is an important part of it, but that's not the answer.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Joanne, good to see you as always. Thank you for being with us. Dr. Joanne Freeman is an award-winning